Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 10th of January. My first time back for the new year, so I'll say Happy New Year from my family to yours. Thanks for watching. As always, you can get your latest forecast information at 800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line, and of course online at weather.gov/Alaska. Now, for those of you watching in the interior, you're going to be the first to see this or feel this happen. There is some colder air coming our way, and you'll notice that, especially as we head toward the end of the week and into early parts of next week. We've just talked about it on Facebook and on Twitter, so make sure you find more information there, as it's going to be outside the scope of what we're really focusing here on during Alaska weather tonight. But in the coming days, you'll want to make sure that you're staying up to date on that. And if big cold is a part of your decision-making process, whether you're in the interior, South Central, or maybe even southeastern Alaska, if you need to know when the big cold's coming, make sure you're paying attention to the weather as we go ahead in the next several days there, as things are going to change in that direction. Here's a look at the email, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. It's a good way to reach out to the TV desk team, and if you've got a question about the website, about the forecast, or whatever, we'll make sure you get those answers that you're looking for. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and one thing that you'll see is a lot of this white milky color not really moving much. That's a sign that we're looking at some really deep cold air in places like the Copper River Basin, the interior, even southwestern Alaska and the Yukon Valley. This morning we're pretty cold. Places around, Northway and Gulkana, those regions were around 20, 25 below, and probably even colder if your cabin was just a little bit further down into the valley there. That's going to be the rule for the next couple days, but one thing that we are watching is a little bit more cloud cover that could be working in from the northwest. There is a front dropping south and east, and it's going to make its approach along the Chukchi coast as we head into tonight and tomorrow. With that, we do expect increasing opportunities for snow across the north and the northwest, and that cold will follow behind it gradually. The big deep cold is still a day or two behind that, so we've got a little room to play with here, but things are changing. As you look at the overall flow, you can see that high pressure is in control. In the northern hemisphere, of course, we know that air rotates around high pressure in a clockwise fashion in this way, so it wouldn't be a big stretch to say high pressure is right about here. And we've got another high centered just out to the south and west, and a little bit over the interior and the western sections of Canada as well. The jet stream would reflect that as well. We've got a lot of support in the upper levels of the atmosphere, but as we look at that a little bit later, you're going to notice that trough trying to set up out across the west, and that is driving the changes that we're talking about with the big cold. Now, for today's weather, you see the front out across the Chukchi Sea, low pressures across the Arctic Ocean at around 1,005 millibars. Here's one high sitting around the Yukon Valley, 1,026 millibars, and another piece of that out across the central Bering Sea, close to St. Paul and St. George, and 1,025 millibar high across the western Bering Sea. And a weak trough or a low pressure zone, and it might even be a stationary boundary there, so we kind of drew that in. It is locking in areas of fog around the Kenai Peninsula as well as areas around Anchorage. You might have seen a little bit of a dusting on your car today. Probably wasn't snow. It might have just been a very heavy diamond dust if you've ever seen that before. So chances are many in South Central were experiencing that today, and probably along places in southwestern Alaska as well. Just kind of a heavy, almost snow. It was more of the fog kind of letting loose of the ice crystals there than anything else. Close to it, not quite snow. Here's a look at tonight's forecast. The front moves ashore, and with that, snow and blowing snow at times across the coastal areas there. Expecting maybe an inch or so in some cases. The winds are going to pick up from the north and northwest, and you'll see that as we get into Wednesday. For many in southeast, conditions should be clear for you tonight, and that'll last for about another 24 hours or so. Low pressure sitting just south of Kodiak Island is going to start drawing a little bit more of a breeze your way. High pressure still sitting across the Gulf. Showers surrounding the central and western Aleutians will continue. That's all rain there, as it's still fairly mild enough for that to occur, not mild in general. And out across the west, clouds are dropping southward into the Norton Sound region, Kotzebue Sound, Also looking at some snow. It sounds like there was a report of freezing rain around the Kotzebue region from some of the local pilots in the region. So thank you for those reports. Those help everyone stay safe as we go through the next several days. Wednesday, the front drops southward toward the Brooks Range and starts to creep over. You'll see more clouds building across the interior, and once again with more cloud cover, that really mitigates those low temperatures at night. If we get some clouds into, say, the middle Tanana Valley, that could really keep the temperatures from dropping through the floor as we head into the overnight hours. So that is one thing that really changes up the forecast, whether that's tonight or a week from now when we've got a lot of colder air to talk about. It does look like temperatures will go to about 20 below in some cases there around the middle Tanana Valley tonight, and looking northward toward the North Slope, snow showers will continue throughout the day across the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seacoast, including places like Barrow and even Arctic Village. For southeast, you'll notice a generally clear day and the breezes will pick up a little bit. Clouds will form around Port Alexander and northward, and in that general region we should probably start to see some showers forming offshore. But as we get into Wednesday night and into Thursday, it looks like there's going to be cold enough air and enough moisture starting to move in that you might see some sea level snow. That probably won't last all day into Thursday, though, because warmer air will start working northward, and any snow in the region in the morning, especially for the central and northern parts of southeast, will gradually start to switch back over toward a rain and snow mix, and then maybe eventually all rain. Places like Hyder may stay in that snow zone, though. So be mindful of the forecast as you go from Wednesday night and into Thursday for parts of southeast. Low pressure will continue advancing southward from the interior, and that should make its way out toward just east of Fairbanks, let's say North Pole, out toward Eagle and Northway at around 1,007 millibars. Behind that is colder air. And you'll notice up north we've got the snow kind of thinning out a little bit more across the middle and southern sections of the Yukon Valley out toward the west. Snow continues advancing southward, though, through the Bering Strait. And one thing to keep in mind, there is a considerable amount of open water right now across the Bering Strait, through the Bering Strait, even northward into the Chukchi Sea. A lot of that is going to freeze very quickly once those temperatures turn over toward that colder regime. Out across the south, the western Gulf, low pressure is working warmer air northward, and as it does that, we're going to see a better chance of clouds and rainfall working its way up towards Sand Point, Unalaska, and Nikolsky eventually, and out across the central Aleutians. The low pressure system there is down to about 976 millibars, and we'll also start to see some snow showers developing around the Valdez area and maybe out toward Cordova, but eastern sides of Prince William Sound probably seeing a better chance of snow showers as we get into Thursday. Everybody else in south central and southwest will still be seeing that slow change over toward more cloudy and eventually colder weather. It will start in the north first and work its way southward. Here's a look at temperatures. In southeast today, we saw teens and 20s in some parts of southern and southeast. Out around Petersburg and northward, though, we stayed generally in the low 30s. Haines and Skagway also close to freezing. The capital city about 30 there. 27 around Yakutat. 20s and some low 30s around Prince William Sound today. Seward was 22, Homer 31, Kenai and Anchorage in the low teens, 12 around Wasilla, Northway, and out around Tok. Some of the coldest weather today, anywhere from 15 to 25 below, 15 below around Fairbanks, 3 below in Eagle. Looking northward, it was 24 above around Arctic Village, and once you got north and out of that lower terrain, temperatures were actually considerably warmer than what we saw a little bit further southward. Tanana was 20 below. Looks like Bettles was about 22 below, and then you get up to Barrow, and it was 16 above. 21 around Wainwright, and as you get in toward places in the Kotzebue Sound region, single digits and low to mid-teens. 15 around Nome today, 15 for Unalakleet, 6 below around Russian Mission, 14 below for McGrath. It was 4 above around Bethel, 26 for Nunivak Island, 30 for St. Lawrence Island, a sign of how mild conditions have been out there, and again still looking at some of the damage from the recent weather in that region. Here's a look at southwest, and you can see low teens for most of the Bristol Bay region out toward Cape Newnham. Iliamna was 11 above. 20s for the Bering Sea coast. As you get out toward the western end of the peninsula, low to mid 30s for many. Sandpoint was 37, Kodiak 34. St. Paul and St. George right at freezing there, 37 around Adak, and it was just about 40 out around Chemie this afternoon. Now, overnight low temperatures are going to be tricky again with the amount of cloud cover. It'll make a big difference, anywhere from 10 to 20 below for many interior locations. 25 below for the areas around Northway and Tok. And the Kenai Peninsula, probably 5 below around parts of South Central, and then 18 above as you get down toward Homer and Seward. 31 above for Kodiak, teens for most of southeast, and you're looking at mid-30s for most of the central and western chains. South and western locations, single digits, 8 in Nome and 27 in St. Lawrence Island, up to 30 there tomorrow. For many in the north, low to mid-teens are expected. Look for 3 below for Fort Yukon, single digits for most of the middle Tanana Valley, including Fairbanks and North Pole, 7 below for Northway and Tok. And many around the Copper River Basin will hover around 0. If you can get out of that sub-zero range tomorrow, it will be really lucky if you can make it that far, because you're going to start out really cold, anywhere from about 20 to 25 below again. So Gulkana, places like Glen Allen, it's going to be a chilly start and something you're probably used to here, but again, a very cold day again tomorrow. Low to mid-teens for most of the Kenai River region, as well as many up into the Susitna Valley. 14 or so around Portage, 28 around Cordova and Valdez, 37 in Kodiak, and for many in southeast, upper 20s to mid-30s again as the weather starts to build offshore and gradually moves its way toward you tomorrow. In the morning again, VFR for southeast, and really all of our main passes around the Alaska Range and the Brooks Range. Most of the interior looks pretty good. IFR, though, developing across the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and north and east of the Pribilofs. You'll see that expand as we get into the afternoon. MVFR creeping into the Norton Sound region along the Aleutians, around Kodiak Island, maybe hitting Kodiak from time to time tomorrow, and the northern Gulf. And again, during the evening and overnight hours is when a lot more weather is going to start to build offshore of southeast heading into Wednesday. For Anactivik Pass, we expect some changes there as we go. Looking for IFR perhaps by the end of the day, especially on the northern side. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass and all the way around the Horn for the Alaska Range look pretty good. Rainy Pass, Isabel Pass, Windy Pass all look to be okay. Mentasta Pass and VFR conditions there. Tanita Pass also looking for visual flight rule throughout the day. Portage Pass looks just fine for your Wednesday, and Chilkoot and White Pass look to be okay as well. Now, as far as the warm air aloft goes, that has been building across the northern and western Gulf and Bristol Bay, but overall it's the surface conditions that are really going to take it on the chin as that next wave of cold starts working its way southward, again heading toward the end of the week and early into the next week. So watch for changes there. Icing potential, we've still got enough moisture up north, and again we had that report around Kotzebue of some freezing rain. It was just off the surface though, so not sure how far down that made it, but any reports that you have from that region certainly do help the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit and our forecasters at the forecast office there in Fairbanks. Looking right now at some light to isolated moderate below 7 to about 10,000 feet across the north slope as we head through the daytime tomorrow. And of course the warm and wet air down south also trying to work its way northward but having trouble, generally staying south of the chain below about 3,000 feet. Here's a jet stream, and as promised, look at this monster ridge out here across the west, just blowing that cold weather our way. Low pressure across the Arctic Ocean also driving that trough of cold right into the interior, and it's going to get another little reinforcing push as we move into the latter part of the week. High pressure right now, those trying to slow that down. It will become fairly ineffective as we go into the next couple days, but right now that's sitting across the Gulf. And if you've been keeping up on the weather on the West Coast or experienced some delays coming and going from Seattle or Portland or anywhere in California, it's this wave right here that's doing all that. It is just a super high wave weather pointed wet and stormy weather into the West Coast, including parts of California and Oregon. At 9,000 feet, low pressure sitting across the Chukchi coast with winds coming in around 30 to as strong as 70 knots as you get out across the northern parts of Siberia and Russia there. Otherwise, it's an east and southeasterly flow across the southern Bering Sea. Wind speeds fairly light under that across the central Bering, and more of a westerly or what we would call a zonal flow across the interior and south central Alaska, including southeast with winds there from the west at 25 knots. Pretty similar conditions here at 3,000 feet. Northwesterlies pick up a little bit more here across the Chukchi coast from 25 to 35 knots. Low pressure sitting north of Demarcation Point, pointing in northwesterlies for the Beaufort Seacoast as well, 20 to 25 there. Light winds across south and western Alaska about 10 to 15, and becoming easterlies they move across the chain and the Pribilofs, 20 to 30 knots, and high pressure right where it ought to be across the Gulf with westerlies working there across the northern Gulf anywhere from 20 to 25. Turbulence, probably won't see a whole lot of that tomorrow. It'll be really hit and miss in any great fashion. Probably starting to see some chop develop on the eastern and northern sides of the Alaska Range below 3,000 feet, and also across the northern parts of Norton Sound and through the Bering Strait below 3,000 feet there. More to come as that frontal boundary continues to work its way southward through the rest of the week, though. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here and an update on the sea ice edge in just a moment. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is Eric Stevens, our good friend from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at UAF. And thanks for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here, Dave.
We love to hear about all the fascinating developments, new and old, and how we're using the tools here, especially around Alaska. And I've got to think that, satellite meteorology right now is a fascinating time to be involved in. If we go back to the first satellite, Tyros, back in 1960, I think is when we got some of those first pictures. Weather and meteorology probably changed that day for a whole lot of people, and it's still changing today, right?
Oh, you know it. Satellite imagery is so important, and it's getting better all the time. Yeah. Of course, never perfect, but especially for us in Alaska, where there are other data sets like radars and weather balloons are so thinly spread. Right. The satellite is the great equalizer because the satellite sees everything.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We've got one particular issue in volcanic ash detection.
That's a big deal here. Yeah.
You know it. If you fly an airplane into volcanic ash, your jet engine might just fail. And an airplane without engines is in a world of hurt. Sure. So if there's a volcano that goes off, satellite imagery is the way to track that plume of ash and to tell pilots this is where you need to not be to avoid this ash plume. And there's a phrase out there, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Okay.
Well, it turns out, what we're going to discuss today, that the difference is everything. There's a technique called channel differencing. Okay. That if you take one piece of the spectrum of what the satellite detects and a slightly different wavelength of that spectrum, even though those two images might look similar, magical things happen when you subtract one from the other. And they reveal information that was already there, but it was hard to find until you did that subtraction.
That sounds like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure when he's got those fancy glasses and he's flipping one up and back and forth. I mean, is this what we're talking about?
Well, let's go more highbrow and talk Michelangelo.
Oh,
so apparently Michelangelo made some amazing sculpture and someone said, Michael, that's amazing. How did you do it? And Michelangelo's reply allegedly was, well, in that rock, the statue was already in there.
Right.
I just scraped away the unnecessary bits. In satellite meteorology, sometimes there are meteorological features that are in the data, but you can't see it until you combine or difference some of the channels. Okay. And we've got a case, good old Pavlov volcano goes off now and then. Sure. And you can observe directly a picture of the volcano. Just take it with your iPhone. You can see a volcano going off. Yep. Right. But if you want to get the broad view, we need satellite to do that. Now, there are a couple of wavelengths that we can look at. So what's a wavelength? That's the amount of space between a peak and a valley and another peak in a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're going to look at 12 micron wavelength and 10.8 micron wavelength.
What is a micron?
So what's a micron? Yeah, we're getting into the geek department now. A micron is a unit of length, and it is quite tiny. We're looking at what's called long wave wavelengths, but it takes 25,000 of these microns to make an inch. A human blood cell is about 5 microns across. So when we're talking about 12 micron imagery as allegedly long wave, well, that's relative.
Pretty short for light.
Yeah, it's other part of the, it's just an expression for the spectrum there. Okay. So we can look at a 12 micron image, say a satellite image. At 12 microns, we're seeing a heat signature here, really, and the way this color enhancement works is the yellow and the red stuff is high cold clouds down here over the Gulf of Alaska into South Central. And if you were asked, where do you find the volcanic ash plume in this image?
Hey, where do you find the volcanic plume in this image?
It's hard to do. I'm not sure I could find it. If you were to look at this image and just say, show me what jumps out at you here, I'd say, well, nothing really. Well, let's look. So 12 micron doesn't help us. Let's look at 10.8 microns. All right. All right, look at that. It's practically the same image. So where's this volcanic ash? Can't find it at 12 microns, can't really see it at 10.8, but when we subtract one channel from the other, magically the plume appears. The color enhancement here highlights the ash in blue. Wow. The information was already there, but we couldn't find it until we subtracted one channel from another. It's almost magical. Similarly, let's say you're looking for fog up on the North Slope. It's kind of a foggy neighborhood. Sure. In 11 micron and 3.9 micron, we've got a 3.9 micron image here. it's a big fuzzy blur over Barrow. We can't see where the fog is. But the information is lurking in there waiting for us to reveal it. All we have to do is find that difference between the 11 micron and the 3.9, and then this image becomes this image, and the fog bank jumps right out, and you can see it up there at Barrow. Now, you got to choose the right tool for the job.
Sure.
Like they say, you open your toolbox, all kinds of stuff in there. What do we need for this particular task? If you want to find volcanic ash, we look at 12 and 10.8 micron, find that difference. If you want to find fog, we'll look at 11 and 3.9 micron, find that difference. It's great, different tools for different jobs. Of course, there's always caveats and gotchas, but this fog procedure, it only works at night, because when the sun comes up, it gets in the way. So every product has its strengths and limitations, and in meteorology, the challenge is using the right tool for the right job, and these are some of those tools.
And discovery is still happening, even with meteorology. The weather's been around for a long time, but the tools that are being developed to understand the meteorology is fascinating and still very new science.
It's such a young science. We've come so far. I'm getting old enough now that I can literally say that, when I was a boy, we didn't have this kind of thing. And there's new things happening all the time. New satellites will be launched in coming years that will have better instruments than ever before. It's an exciting time, and this is so helpful for Alaska because satellites help fill in the gaps between other ways of observing the weather. Satellites, the great equalizer for Alaska.
Yeah, and help so many people stay safe in so many ways every day up here in the last frontier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, protecting lives and property.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. We love to hear about this fascinating information, and boy, it just makes me want to go watch satellite pictures all day. So hopefully we're inspiring more people to do the same thing, and just be curious. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you next time. Here's a current update of the sea ice edge across Cook Inlet there. The ice has been growing enough so that it may be changing our operations there across northern Cook Inlet. And with cold weather coming our way, it wouldn't be a surprise to see that continuing to grow southward a little bit more as we go in toward the end of the week and early next week. But probably of a bigger consequence, besides the little bit of ice that we see out there around the Homer Spit and on the upper end of Kashmak Bay, is the ice that's just ready to grow and just kind of waiting to grow across the Bering Strait and southward once again. There's a lot of open water right there, and with cold air moving south, if the winds can lay down just a little bit, once that happens, that water is going to freeze over fairly quickly. And if you're up across the North Slope there and along the coastal areas, you probably notice some polynyas out there. Those are expected to freeze over fairly quickly as well once that cold arrives. So be on the lookout for changing ice conditions still, even in the dead of winter there, for areas north of St. Lawrence Island and out across the coastal areas well west of Ammonach and Nome and Tin City, there where the open water exists right now. Here's a look at the coastal forecast for southeastern Alaska. Winds are going to stay light on the inside waters there, around 10 knots or so, generally from the south and east for the central and northern parts. As you get into Clarence Strait, a northerly flow at 10 knots, 2-foot seas there for all areas inside. Along the outer coast, 10 to 15 knots, generally from the west and northwest. Seas range from about 4 to 5 feet on Wednesday and come up to about 6 to 7 feet as winds switch around to more of a southwesterly location on Thursday. Remember, that's going to start pushing some of that weather in. The wet air will meet up with the colder air, and there's a chance that you'll start out the morning there with some sea level snow, but that could change as we go through the day. Northerlies coming through the central and northern waters there, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, opposing that a southeasterly flow in the Clarence Strait with a 4-foot sea on Thursday. For south central Alaska, light winds and small seas in most areas. And over Cook Inlet, again, you see we've got the ice noted there. Northerly south of Calgon Island, 3-foot seas. Westerlies coming across the Barren Islands up to 25 knots once we reach into the western Gulf. Northerlies inside of Prince William Sound, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Look for a little bit of northeasterly shift there on Thursday. Light and variable winds across the northern Gulf. Northerlies outside of Resurrection Bay and east of the Barren Islands. And across Kodiak Island, 15 knots with a 3 to 5-foot sea. 3-foot seas there inside of Shelikof Strait with that northwesterly flow. In Bristol Bay, 10 knots, small seas in the sea ice-free waters. Northeasterlies down the Bering Sea coast, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea, and 5 to 6-foot seas across the Pacific waters. That becomes 30 knots, though, northwest from Castle Cape to Chignik there on Thursday. 5-foot seas there, 4-foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, and northeasterlies pick up down the Bering Sea coast on a 30-knot wind, 7-foot seas expected. Broad easterlies sweeping across the Aleutians as we get through your Wednesday. 15 to 25 in just about all areas. 9 to 11 foot seas across the Pacific side and 4 to 7 foot seas for the Bering Sea coast. Out across Kiska to Attu, about 10 to 12 feet expected there again on 25 knots. The winds are going to pick up a little bit more on Thursday as that cold air starts to push its way out across more areas. Northeasterlies pick up for the central and eastern chain. North and northeasterlies for the western chain. 12 to 13 foot seas there. 15 to 17 foot seas for the Pacific coast and 12 to 13 foot seas for most of the Bering Sea coast for the central and eastern range. North and northwesterlies working down the west coast. 15 to 20 there as we get into Wednesday. 3 to 4 foot seas expected there for St. Paul and St. George. An easterly wind at 20 knots with a 4 foot sea for Thursday. Northeasterlies blowing at about the same. North and northeasterly winds there 25 to 30. Look for 6 to 8 foot seas for most of the region in the west. 12 foot seas for St. Paul and St. George at 30 knots. Now for the north slope, look for that west and northwesterly flow over the ice. 20 to 30 there on Wednesday. West and northwesterly winds for the Chukchi Sea coast, 20 knots. 25 as you get into the areas outside of Kotzebue Sound. For Thursday, northwesterlies still blowing about 20 to 25, and westerlies for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast at 20 to 25 as we get into your Thursday afternoon again, looking at the marine waters. Now, a recap of the entire weather picture. Cold air is coming, and with that, probably some snow on the north slope. Blowing snow expected offshore as we get into the forecast tonight. Clear conditions for southeast, for south central. Will be some areas of fog. The question is, as we go forward and cold air is coming, how much cloud cover is going to be in place, because that will dramatically impact how cold it gets where you are, and that includes places in the interior. For Wednesday, a chance for some snow showers to develop across the interior, a better chance for snow across the north slope and the north and western coast, including Norton Sound and the Seward Peninsula. Weather starts to shape up offshore of southeast. By Wednesday night, sea level snow could be possible for many in central and northern parts of the Panhandle, but that may gradually mix in with rain as we go through your Thursday, and colder air will continue working its way southward through the rest of the week. So stay tuned to the forecast this week. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.